Hey everybody. So I'm doing this as a live stream really just to force myself to record these things because otherwise I'm just going to keep going back and forth and just keep replacing them. But anyways, so welcome to the channel. This is another majestic INFJ, and if you're new, I focus on just sort of discussing, cognitive functions, Jungian typology, MBTI, socionics, that kind of stuff. Mostly geared towards the INFJ, but hopefully there's something in it for everybody or all the different types. And it's really just sort of a stream of consciousness, so I apologize in advance. Maybe one of these days I'll get a little bit more systematic about it, but we'll see. Also, I usually preface these videos by saying I'm kind of assuming that you have a baseline knowledge of the different personality types, the different cognitive functions, what their ordering or stacking is in the different types. And if you don't, there's plenty of videos out there online that sort of break these things down and give explanations for them. So, with all that being said, what I would like to do today is I'm just going to discuss the tool function in different types. Really, I'll probably go through all 16 different types, and it's really 8 different tools or tool functions. And just sort of compare and contrast and talk about how the different types use their tool functions, and also sort of provide a kind of a rough explanation of at least how I see the tool function being used. So I'll go through some examples of the different types just to sort of give you a feeling of what I'm talking about, and then maybe sort of wrap it up with discussing, what exactly I think the tool functions are doing, and how to differentiate them from other functions, or other functions in other places in your stack or your order. So to start off with, for those who might not be familiar, the tool function is basically your second function, usually referred to as the secondary function in MBTI. And so, for example, if you're an INFJ, your first function is introverted intuition. And then your second function, which is going to be your tool function, would be your extroverted feeling. And then if you're an INTJ, your first function, again, is introverted intuition, but your tool function is going to be extroverted thinking. So whatever your type is, if you know the sort of the stacking order of the cognitive functions, it's going to be whatever's in your second slot or the second position. And in general, the way that I think about the tool function, and this is just, the way I think about it. Other people might have other ways of explaining it, but but because I'm an INFJ, I come up with my own explanation on how these things work. But the tool function I see is basically, what arrow in your quiver do you use when faced with having to accomplish some sort of task, or some sort of goal oriented behavior, and primarily when it's sort of uncertain or new to you. So for example, if you're an INFJ and you've got extroverted feeling as your tool function, when faced with sort of a new situation, something you're doing for the first time, maybe, that is going to be, by and large, the function you're going to rely on, to sort of get you through whatever whatever the issue is. And we'll talk about specific examples in a minute here. Um, so it's not necessarily your dominant function. So your dominant function I see is just sort of your baseline. That's just the way you are all the time. And again, when you think of different cognitive functions, you want to think of them as your brain has what we call the attentional spotlight. Where are you focusing your attention in your brain? So if you sort of think of it like an actual, theater or stage, you have these different functions playing different roles in your cognitive mental landscape. And whenever a particular task or something comes up, you're going to focus that spotlight on different functions. And really, what's really going on is your brain is just sort of activating that part of the brain that does that thing. Um, so if your, attention is focused on extroverted thinking, your attentional spotlight in your brain is going to focus on the parts of the brain that are responsible for extroverted thinking activity, and it's also at the same time going to suppress other parts of the brain. Now of course it's not all or one, it's sort of an analog fluid system, and so you can have different functions sort of operating at the same time, but they're going to be hogging your attentional resources differently. Okay, so when you think about the tool function, again, sort of think of a situation that might be new to you or there's a little uncertainty involved, and your brain has to focus its attention on something, some sort of cognitive process. And it's the way that you and your personality type deals with the situation. So probably best to just go through some examples here and maybe sort of illustrate what I'm talking about. So the best example I could think of is, what do you do when you're preparing for something like a job interview, maybe a first date, something where it's new to you, you've got a goal in mind, and you're trying to you know, impress somebody in one way or another, show your level of competence, all that kind of stuff. And you're preparing for it and you don't really know how this is all going to shake out, right? Um, so let's go through and my sort of fundamental argument here is that you're going to rely on your tool function when you do your preparation. Now, yes, it interacts with whatever your dominant function is, so the line gets a little blurry sometimes, but bear with me, and just sort of think of it as your tool function sort of running the show. Um, when you're preparing or sort of trying to figure out how all this is going to play out. So let's say you're an INFJ. We'll start with INFJs and ISFJs first because they've got extroverted feeling as their tool function. And the situation is they've got a job interview coming up, they got a first date, they've got something coming up where it's new to them, they're going to be meeting new people, and they've got some sort of goal in mind, right? They want to establish a relationship, they want to get the job, whatever it is. So in preparation for it, what they're going to rely pretty heavily on their extroverted feeling. Now, INFJs and ISFJs are a little difficult to use as examples, especially the first example, because I'm an INFJ and ISFJs are sort of the same way. We tend to just sort of roll with the situation. We're very go with the flow kind of people. And so you don't really see us doing a whole lot of prep work for stuff. We'll do a little, but we are sort of going to rely on, when we get into the interview or when we meet the person out on the date or whatever it is, we know we're just going to sort of go with the flow. And we know that our tool function is going to help us sort of establish some sort of connection, some sort of relationship, some sort of like comforting rapport with whoever we're interacting with. That's just who we are. Um, and but in preparation, if we are taking it seriously, probably what we're going to do is try to focus on who is the person that we're meeting with? What type of person are they? Where did they go to school? What's their experience? Um, and what's their role? If it's a job interview, what's their role in the organization? What's their place in sort of the social hierarchy? All that kind of stuff. Are they a partner? Are they associate? Is it the HR manager? If so, is it a vice president? Is it a senior vice president? All that kind of stuff becomes relevant to us. And the reason is because we want to prep ourselves as best as we can to be able to relate to the person. And not only to be able to relate to the person, but to know what type of person this is and what they're probably looking for, right? So, a couple of extreme examples. If you look somebody, if you've got an interview scheduled and you look up the person who's going to be interviewing you, and they've got sort of a military background or something, and you can tell, this is probably like an ESTJ, very, maybe hardline kind of, puts a lot of value and responsibility, that kind of stuff. So you're going to sort of prepare yourself to sort of, show off how responsible you are and diligent and just sort of play the yes, ma'am, yes, sir game. Um, you again using your FE because that's what your FE does. Um, and then maybe on the other end of the spectrum, you might get somebody who is more of a liberal arts major, spent some time in the Peace Corps, isn't probably a regimented military type person, is probably more interested in, how do you get along with people and what are your values and what do you care about? And we're going to be, as extroverted feeling types, using that as our tool function, we're going to be able to sort of rely on that and be able to relate to somebody on that level, right? um, so with the INFJ, maybe a little bit of the difference between the ISFJ and the INFJ here. With the INFJ, they're gonna, as they're sort of doing their prep work, trying to figure out who am I meeting with, what kind of institution is this, what do they value, what do they, what are sort of their core values as an institution, what are the types of people they want at their institution. We're gonna sort of think of that kind of stuff. What's the core value, what's the essence of these people, what type of person is it that I'm dealing with? An ISFJ might do it a little differently, right? So again, they're probably going to focus on who they're meeting with, what sorts of social dynamics to expect, but they're probably going to think more in terms of their, because they've got introverted sensing as their dominant function. And so that's going to be sort of the underlying current, right? And so they're going to be relying more on sort of past experience, like, you know, I knew somebody like this. My old boss, went to the same law school or the same med school as this person. And what was my experience like with that person? And how did I get along with them? Or this person went to the University of Oklahoma, and I remember watching University of Oklahoma football games with my grandfather or something, just trying to find some sort of personal experience that they have that's going to help them maybe relate to this person. Okay. But, again, by and large, we'll do a little bit of preparation just to sort of know what we're dealing with. So we're not walking in completely blind. Um, but we're really going to just sort of go with the flow because that's just what ISFJs and INFJs typically do when we're using our tool function. Okay, so let's contrast that maybe to um, somebody who has introverted feeling as their tool function. So this would be your ESFPs, where extroverted sensing is their primary or dominant function. Introverted feeling is their secondary or tool function. And who would the other be? ENFPs, right? So extroverted intuition as their primary, and introverted feeling as their secondary or tool function. So they're not. So even though it's quote unquote the feeling function, they're going to prepare more on selling themselves and their um, basically how the job or whatever it is that they're doing matches up with their core values, right? So they're going to think of reasons why this job is important to them and why this job is important to their worldview, right? I want this job because I want to make a difference in the world. I want this job because, it pays a lot of money and I like nice things. It could be as simple as that. I want this job because I love, you know, new experiences. I love traveling, so being a flight attendant, if that's what the job is, would be the perfect job for me, because it matches up with things that I value, right? Um, so an ENFP, again, so their underlying current is giving me this extroverted intuition. They tend to be pretty socially conscious people. They tend to think about, how can I change the world? How can I make the world a better place? And, so they're going to think of approaching the job and the job interview as, hey, you hire me. I'm fully dedicated. I'm 100% on board because this thing matches my values and I want to make a difference. And this is exactly the type of job where I can, do what I want to do in my life. And achieve my sort of value driven goals, right? So ENFPs, they're going to do a lot of interviews with nonprofits, government work, journalism, things that are sort of out there, that at least have a pretense or at least are intending to make a difference in the world. Not necessarily, again, none of this is like absolute, at all, but that's just sort of generally how the vibe I get with the ENFP. Contrast that with the ESFP. So the ESFP, so they're extroverted sensing, right? So they're more sort of go-getters. I think of the extroverted sensing function as this is the function that gets you to do things, to become active, to quote unquote pull the trigger, in a manner of speaking. So they're gonna think of it as so they're thinking more about, is this job going to let me do what I like to do, right? So you could imagine somebody's interviewing for a job at a department store or a clothes store, and if it's an ESFP, they probably like clothes, they like nice things, typically. And so they're thinking, wow, this really matches with the kind of stuff that I like. I love clothes. Or you see a lot of ESFP hairdressers, cosmetologists, that kind of thing, because they love pretty things and they love making people, look pretty and feel pretty, and clothes, accessories, all that kind of stuff. And they're great at those types of jobs because that sort of aligns a lot of times with their values, right? It's things that they like. uh you know you might also have people who ESFPs who are golfers, right? And they love playing golf, and they want to be a golf pro, or they want to be a caddy, or they want to work at a golf club, because they're going to be able to go out and play golf, 5 times a week. Or they want to work for a sports team or something, because they just love engaging in sports, whether it's watching it or playing it, or just playing fantasy football or whatever. That's what they like to do, and the job just sort of matches with things that they like to do. So these are definitely the people where they're going to give you the advice of, like, get a job that doesn't feel like a job, something that matches with your values. And you never go to work. You never work a day in your life, because you're always having fun doing what you like. So that's sort of the ESFP, ENFP thing. So when they're using this tool function, again, they're a little bit more go with the flow types of people. They're probably not going to over prepare or anything, but they are going to think, okay, is this the type of job that I'm going to like, and I'm going to like doing it, or it's going to give me the opportunity to do things that I like. I like to travel. So being a flight attendant would be the perfect job for me. That kind of thing. It's going to let me do what I want to do. So a lot of their sort of introverted feeling tool function is going to be about just deciding whether they want to do it in the first place, right? They're not going to go to a job interview for a job that they don't want to do. It's just not what I think an ENFP and an ESFP would rather be unemployed than do a job that they don't want to do, unless just they absolutely have to take some job. And then when they're actually in the interview, so unlike an INFJ and an ISFJ, where we're gonna put on our little extroverted feeling mask and do the nodding and smiling and laughing at everybody's jokes, and just sort of build that nice rapport with whoever we're interacting, just so that they like us or they don't not like us. Um, that's going to be the INFJ ISFJ approach. The ESFP ENFP, their approach is not going to be so much that relationship building. They're going to want to sell themselves to whoever it is that's interviewing them. They're going to want to show how much they want this job, because it lets them do all the stuff that they want to do. I love clothes, and this is going to let me stay on top of the trends and get a good discount. I love doing makeup. I love playing golf. I love playing music, or whatever it is. And this job's going to let me do it. And so they're going to try to impress upon the person who's interviewing them their passion for the job. Like, you want to hire me because nobody wants this job more than I do, because it totally aligns with my values, um nobody else will be as dedicated to this job as me, right? Okay, so those are the feeling, the people who use extroverted feeling or introverted feeling for their tool function. So now let's switch gears here and go to the thinking function. So start with extroverted thinking. So these are going to be your INTJs and ISTJs. And again, let's think about, they've got a job interview coming up. How are they going to prepare? So the ISTJs, and I see a lot, I'm a lawyer and I interview a lot of, or just see, a lot of ISTJs, INTJs in this field. because they're phenomenal corporate lawyers. It's just perfect job for them. Same with, accounting, anything that's just sort of process driven, they're great at. So, those sorts of jobs naturally tend to attract ISTJs, INTJs. And so when they're interviewing, they are going to come up with a game plan, right? So they're using their extroverted tool function to plan out, this is what I'm going to do in the interview. And this is, I'm going to show up at this time. It's going to be 10 minutes early. I'm going to park in the garage here. It's about 10 minutes walking time. I'm going to have, my whole outfit lined up, it's going to be very simple, does the trick kind of outfit, not too flashy or anything. And here, and here's how I think the interview will unroll, and here are the responses that I plan to provide, right? So very, very systematic, very planned out. And not so, again, unlike their feeling counterparts, not so much focused on who am I dealing with here, or what type of job is this, does it align with what I want to do. They're focused on the plan. And different sorts of things that they can drop into the conversation. Did you happen to notice I had a 4.0? Did you happen to notice I was on law review? That kind of thing. So the difference between them, so again, the ISTJ is going to have introverted sensing is sort of their sort of fundamental, state that they're working with. And so when they're doing their game plan, they're going to rely more on sort of experience. So introverted sensing is about knowledge that you have through experience. And it could be your personal experience. I've done a million of these interviews, and every time I do this interview, here's how it works. Here's the questions that they ask, and I'm prepared. They're going to ask me, there's probably 10 types of questions they're going to ask me, and they'll ask me 5 of those. And so I'm going to be prepared for all 10. You're right. They also might, and so in addition to sort of their personal experience, they also might be relying a little bit on sort of rules of thumb, tricks of the trade, little rules that they've sort of picked up along the way, either by reading a book or just sort of common knowledge imparted upon them by people that had their job before. And so they're just going to sort of think through the interview process that way as they're planning, and plan accordingly. Okay. So the INTJ is probably, so they've got the introverted intuition, which is less about experiential knowledge and more about knowledge of things that you haven't experienced, sort of putting two together and figuring out that it's 4. Now, of course, that's introverted thinking, but you get it. It's a metaphor, using metaphors, using analogies, reading between the lines, looking around corners, seeing how things are probably going to play out. So they're probably going to be a little bit more creative in doing their game planning. They're still going to try to plan, right? But they're going to sort of think about it in the sense of, what is an interview? What's the point of an interview? Like, how do interviews really work? What's sort of the fundamental essence of an interview, and sort of plan accordingly. Like, this is what people are really looking for in an interview. And so I'm going to make sure that, when I answer such and such type of question, that I'm, um, getting at the core of it, right? So again, the tool function and the dominant function are sort of working together here. It's a little hard to parse out, but think of the tool function as the operator here. It's the one that's sort of doing the stuff, and it's just relying on this sort of this other function that's just always sort of operating in the background, the introverted intuition or introverted sensing. So INTJs, ISTJs, they're going to plan, and hopefully the interview, nothing goes wrong. They don't have a flat tire, or show up on the wrong day or something like that. Something that goes against their plan and completely disrupts the whole thing. But they'll be okay. They're good. They're very, very good interviewers, because they certainly plan ahead. They know how to respond to questions. I mean, a lot of times, it's just sort of funny anecdote. You can have an ISTJ or an INTJ, and they're answering the question before you even finish the question, right? Because they just know what you're going to ask, and they're just like, "Yeah, I'm glad you asked." Before you even ask, before the question even got out of your mouth. But bless them, they're awesome workers, awesome people to work with. Okay, so that's the extroverted thinking. Introverted thinking. So again, tool function. So we're trying to figure out which types have introverted thinking as their second function. So those are going to be your ENTPs and your ESTPs, right? So the ENTP is going to have introverted thinking as their tool function, extroverted intuition as their dominant. ESTPs are going to have introverted thinking as their tool or second function, and extroverted sensing as their dominant. Now, both of them are going, so when they're using their tool function and they're preparing and trying to think, okay, how am I going to nail this job interview? To them, it's all about, I am the most logical choice for this job. And if you pick anybody else, you're making a serious mistake, right? Like, I am the most qualified, the smartest, the most dedicated, have the most credentials, and it's just absolutely the only logical conclusion that you can come to, right? And the funny thing is, it's kind of the same when they're dating, and they're trying to convince somebody. I think of a guy trying to impress a girl. They'll be like, "Hey, I make the most money, or I'm the funniest, or I'm the smartest," and clearly that's what you value, and you're not going to find anybody better than me. And here's the logical case for why I'm the best candidate for this job. So very, very different than your introverted feelers, right? Your introverted feelers are not so much about, I'm the best candidate, bar none. You can't come up with a logical argument against it. It's more about, like, I'm the best candidate because I value it so much, and you're not going to get anybody more dedicated to this job than me. That's the introverted feeler. Introverted thinker, it's not so much that they value the job. I mean, they've got polar FI, in which I talk about in other videos what the polar function is, but that's basically their blind spot. And so they're not even thinking about how much they value this job, or how it aligns with, their view of the world and how they're going to change the world. They're just making their case. They're making their argument. I am the best candidate. And, that can go different ways, right? So with the ESTP, again, they've got the extroverted sensing. And again, that's sort of your activity function, your get up and go, your go, no go, pull the trigger, don't pull the trigger, let's engage in activity, primarily in the outside world. And so these guys are the go-getters, right? These guys are the ones who are just like, look, I'm going to get up at 5 a.m. every morning, and before noon, before lunch, I'm going to call 25 contacts every day. Um, I'm willing to work on commission because I believe in myself. Nobody's going to be better than me. Here are all the reasons because I am so active, right? And um, and so they are making a logical argument that they are the best worker, right? Not so much the most diligent worker, but they're going to be active, and you are going to be able to rely on them. They will get up at the crack of dawn every day to prove their point, right? And it's this weird like they want to prove that they're right, and that they are the best candidate, so they're going to be the one up, at the crack of dawn, just to show you how active they are and how busy they are. Again, obviously they make great employees, great salespeople, because they're just go-getters. And contrast that with the ENTP. So this is kind of a funny distinction, I think. So the ENTP, they've got the extroverted intuition as sort of their baseline dominant function. And so their logical argument is going to be more like extroverted intuition. Let me back up here. So extroverted intuition is about exploring ideas in the metaphysical realm, right? So in the verbal, non-physical realm. So they're not like the go-getters. They're not the people who are going to get up at 6 a.m. And, in fact, they're probably the people who are going to sleep in the latest. However, they are going to convince you that they are the best person for the job because they thought of all the alternatives. If you hire this type of person, they're going to let you down because of this. If you hire this type of person, they're not going to do a very good job because the job requires, this type of ability, and that's what I do. Like, it requires, logic and thinking outside the box and all that kind of stuff, and that's what I do. And so I'm the perfect person for it. Very, very logical. They're not really going to rely so much on their credentials, like, well, I went to Harvard, and so clearly I'm the best candidate. They're gonna come up with an argument. They're gonna come up with, here's what you want, and if that's what you want, here's why I'm the best person, and give you a very logical argument for it, as opposed to the ESTPs who are just like, hey, we all know what you want, and I'm gonna work day and night to make sure that we accomplish the goal. And if you hire anybody else, you're an idiot, and I will go work for your competitor and bury you guys. That's how an ESTP is probably going to handle an interview. Where the ENTP would probably be more like, if you don't hire me, all these horrible things are going to, happen or get unresolved, and and I will go invent something that will completely put you guys out of business anyways. Okay, so that's introverted thinking, making the logical case. Again, tool function, dealing with uncertainty, dealing with a new situation and trying to figure out, okay, how do I get what I want? In essence, that's really what your tool function is. It's the function that you spend your attention on when you're trying to figure out, how do I get what I want? And more on that in a bit. Put a placeholder on that. Okay, so we covered feeling, thinking. Let's talk about the perception functions, sensing, intuition. And let's start with the sensing ones first. So again, we're talking about the tool function. So we're looking for people with, let's say, extroverted sensing in their tool function, second function. So those are going to be your ISTPs and your ISFPs. Either introverted thinking in their first function, and then extroverted sensing in their second function, or introverted feeling in their first function, extroverted sensing in their second function. But the thing that they share is the fact that they rely on extroverted sensing as their tool function. So a little bit different than your ESTP, who, just wants to make the logical argument that they're a go-getter. A little bit different than your ESFP, who is all excited that that this job is going to allow them to do things. Those are, when the SP's in the top slot. The ISTP, INTP, again, they're using their second function as, okay, what do I need to do to prepare for this interview or this date? And so they're going to activate that, that activity center in their brain. And they're going to want to do things to get themselves prepared, right? So let's take a ISFP. Introverted feeling, extroverted sensing. So, they're going to want to, let's see what a good example is. So these are the people who are going to have a very polished resume, have a very polished, they're going to go out and they're going to make business cards. They're going to make a website that you can go to, and it'll have all their credentials and everything, that you need to know about them, because they prepare by doing, right? They're probably going to drive by the place, where the interview is, just to sort of get a feel for, what kind of place are we dealing with here. They're definitely going to follow up with a follow-up email, thanking you for your time. That's not to say that everybody who does a follow-up email is an ISFP or an ISTP, but that is just like a core thing that they do, because it's all part of the process and it's all part of doing. And they feel like, I can accomplish my goal, which is what your tool function is trying to do, by doing things, by making a very polished resume, by making this web page that, the person that whoever's interviewing me can go to. In the dating world, they probably have a fantastic Instagram page or whatever the social media is, where, they can share it with whoever they're, and like, oh, here's all my artwork and here's all the things that I do, right? Here's the places I've been. Here's, the music that I made, the artwork that I made, really impressing on people, the stuff that they do. And when they're interviewing for a job, it's not so much like the ESTP, where, he's trying to make a logical argument by saying, look, I'm the best person. If you don't hire me, I'll go to your competitor and put you out of business. They're going to be, their tool function is, their SP is going to come into action, and they're just going to do things. They're the people who are going to open the door for, just trying to think of some good examples, but they're just going to want to show the person that they're a doer, and be very active. In the extroverted feeling, so if you're an ISFP and you're interviewing for a job, you're probably gonna, these are the people who are gonna pick out the outfit for that interview, right? They're not going to rely on clothes that they've already got in the closet. Like, if it's important enough, they're like, this is the outfit for this interview, right? And why? Because, it matches the culture. It might even sort of match their logo colors or something. I don't know. It's kind of hard to come up with an example, because I'm as an INFJ, I'm very SP's in the fourth slot. So, we can do things, but people have to sort of push us along. ISTPs and ISFPs are sort of, they're the people who are self-motivated self-starters. They just kind of do things because that's how they deal with uncertainty and planning. Okay. And then an ISTP, introverted thinking, they're definitely going to come up with a logical argument for why they're, the best candidate, but they're going to do something to sort of illustrate that argument, right? So again, they might have a very polished resume or business cards that look phenomenal, because they want to show their worthiness, the fact that they're sort of the best candidate here and it's the logical decision, but they do it not by putting that argument in your face, but by doing things that show you, they're show not tell types of people, if that makes sense. So contrast them to the ESTP. Again, the ESTP is the one who will just tell you straight to your face, like, if you don't hire me, you're an idiot. And because I'm the best candidate, in the this side of the Mississippi. And if you don't hire me, I will go straight to a competitor, accept less money, and put you guys out of business, in exchange for a big bonus or something. Like, they will lay out the argument and throw it in your face. Right. And with the ISTP, they've got the argument. It's back there. It's certainly, in their head, and they will let little pieces out, but they're not going to throw it in their face. What they're going to do is they are going to make their argument by showing. And, this is probably engaging in some stereotypes here, but I think of it as sort of kind of a Japanese way of doing things. Like, if you know sort of the Japanese culture, they do not throw things in your face. They will just sort of subtly, show you the argument. Same for, in the US for Southerners, they'll sort of, a lot of times sort of talk around the issue. But anyways, I don't want to get into a whole stereotype thing here, but when I think of ISTP, I think, sort of very Japanese culture. They're just very cool about that kind of stuff. Okay, so that's probably not the best example. I'll try to come up with some good examples. I'm doing this on the fly, but hopefully you get my point that, these are the people who are going to have a very polished look to them. They are going to go out and get the new tie, the new shirt, the new shoes, the new dress, the new accessories, the new handbag, because, whatever it is, they're going to, find a way to show their dedication to what they're doing, the interview. Okay. Enough of that. I've rambled on too long. So let's talk about introverted sensing. ESTJs and ESFJs. Now, these guys crack me up. So when they're planning, again, so introverted sensing is their second function, and they're using it to plan. Okay. ESFJs and ESTJs are not, they don't deal with uncertainty very well, right? Because their tool function, like, how do I get what I want? How do I accomplish my goal here? It's introverted sensing, which is all about experience, past experiences, events that you've experienced, or little tidbits or rules or things that you've picked up along the way. And when thrown into a new situation where where there's a lot of uncertainty, they're exact opposite of the of your INFJ, ISFJ, who just sort of go with the flow and just, hey, we'll figure it out. Um, they don't like it. The ESTJ, ESFJ, with that introverted sensing, they want to be able to rely on experience. They want to be able to rely on tried and tested rules um, when they're preparing for something or trying to get something, that they want. Right. So the ESFJ is gonna both of them are gonna spend a lot of time trying to build up experience, trying to plan by building up, maybe sort of, excuse me, excuse me, maybe sort of building up artificial experience. So let me give you an example. The ESFJ, um, I could see calling his or her friends and just being like, hey, what should I do? Right. Like trying to get some social input, trying to get like, what kind of questions do you think they're going to ask me? And if they ask me this question, what should my response be? They're probably going to practice right in front of the mirror. Hi, I'm so and so. Oh, what an interesting question. And so they're going to try to build experience. So when they're put in that situation, they can pull off of that experience, right? So they're going to call a friend and say, well, you've done an interview, like, and they're going to, the ESFJ in particular, they're going to find a friend that either interviewed with this company before or had a similar job, and they're just going to be like, okay, what types of questions did they ask you? And what did you say? And blah, 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 blah. And it's not so much information gathering in my mind, it's like experience building, right? Like they're trying to build artificial experience. So when they're thrown into the situation and they're thrown into the interview and they have to use their tool function to interact with the interviewer, um, they want to sort of recall experience, whether it was, sort of artificial in the sense that, your friend just told you what to expect. Um, or, they might want to do a bunch of different interviews, So a lot of like, for like law school and business school and stuff, they'll do mock interviews, you can go in and somebody will volunteer their time to interview you and give you sort of feedback on, what was good, what wasn't. And, to me, I think the ESFJ, the ESTJ are doing it just so that they can get the experience of doing it, right? So that they can be like, oh, okay, they're going to ask this type of question, and here's how I respond. Um, where, maybe an INTJ or an ISTJ, they might do the mock interview, not because they want the experience of it, and to get used to it and get rid of the uncertainty, but because they want to learn, what are some of the tricks? They want that feedback. They want somebody to tell them, oh, well, I asked you about this, and here was your response, and that was a good response, but the person is probably going to be looking for X, Y, and Z, and you only gave them X and Y, right? So that would be how an INTJ, ISTJ might use a mock interview. Again, the ESTJ, ESFJ, where they've got the introverted sensing as their tool function, they're just trying to build experience. So, and they'll read books, most likely the ESTJ a lot of times are going to read books on how to do an interview, right? Like all those little books at the bookstore or on Amazon or whatever, like how to nail your interview, or 50 different questions to expect on an interview, or how to get that job. That's all for ESFJs and ESTJs, right? Because they want to just sort of build some experiential knowledge that they can use when they're in their interview. The other thing I noticed with a lot of ESTJs and ESFJs is they want to make sure, again, because they're using this introverted sensing as the tool function, they want to make sure that their body is like 100%, right? So they're going to be like, I've got to get a lot of sleep tonight. I can't go out over the weekend because I got a big interview coming up on Monday, or I have a big date coming up. And so I need to get some sleep, and I need to make sure I'm eating well and getting my vitamins and all that kind of stuff, because they want to make sure that their introverted sensing is all, tip top shape. And I know a guy who I think is probably an ESTJ, and he just recently sort of took a real big leadership role in his company, and he quit drinking, and he was not like a big drinker or anything, but he would socially drink, but he was just like, I just can't do it because I can't get up in the morning and get all the stuff that I need to get done. Um, and that's a very ESTJ, ESFJ type of, uh, a very good example of them having introverted SI as their tool function, right? Because if I feel like crap, I can't operate, right? And where you contrast that with the ESFP, or maybe even an INFJ, where it's like, okay, I don't, I'm not even really paying attention to how I feel. I'm sure I'll be fine. Okay, so that's ESTJ, ESFJ. They crack me up, mainly because they really do. They're the two types that I think probably get the most stressed about things like interviews, first dates, anything where um, it's they got to deal with people, and there's a bunch of uncertainty, like they just have no idea how things are going to play out, and it's not something that they've done a million times before. And so they want that sort of experiential knowledge, like give me some mock interviews, give me practice, give me, I'm going to read some books, give me those 50 top questions to nail the interview, that kind of thing. Okay. So we did the sensing. Okay. Now, last one, we did, we did extroverted sensing, introverted sensing. So now we'll move on to intuition. So let's start with extroverted intuition. Who are these guys? So INFPs and INTPs. Yeah, our buddies, the INTPs. Everybody's buddy. INFPs and INTPs they're not planners. They are not planners. They think they're planners because, so they're using this extroverted intuition, which again is just sort of exploring all the possibilities, things that could happen, maybe happen, are likely to happen, have a probability of happening, all the combinations and permutations of things that could happen, right? And so they're just gonna fret. Right? They're gonna think about like all the possible weird ass questions that could come out of nowhere. And probably just spend their time just sort of going through the interview through their head, that has really no bearing in reality, right? It's just like, this is how the interview could go. And so very, very different from their ESTP, ESFJ and ESTJ colleagues, where they want certainty. They want to know, how is this thing going to unroll, because I need to rely on my, experience. The INTPs and the INFPs are on the way opposite end of the spectrum, almost in a completely different dimension, where they're just thinking about all the possibility that could happen, and all the funny jokes they're going to tell, and how everybody's going to be laughing, and just loving it, or everybody's going to hate them and it's going to be horrible and miserable. And they're just not planners. They're not planners. And they have that SP polar function, which also sort of prevents them from sort of, again, that's sort of their blind spot, the SP, extroverted sensing. I say SP because I'm sort of used to the Kinsey, who's that Kearney guy, whatever, his temperament model. And so I apologize. I a lot of times will say SP when I mean SE, extroverted sensing. But I think anyway. Anyway, so they're going to not have the SE, to actually motivate them to do anything, right? So, they're, oh, geez, they probably aren't going to have an outfit ready, scrambling around at the last minute, like, oh my God, I totally forgot to do laundry. Not only, unlike the ISFP, who went out and bought a whole new outfit for this interview in preparation by doing things. Oh no. The INTP, INFP, they're in their own little world thinking about what could happen and completely missing out on what's probably going to happen. Like, what do they need to do? So no shade. I love INTPs. I love INFPs because of what they give to the world, but they are not planners. So I can't even get into what's going on in their head. And so if you are an INTP or you're an INFP, God bless you. And I hope it works out. Maybe you want to engage the help of one of your ESTJ or ESFJ friends, and they will give you a book or two on, or some advice on interviews that they've gone through. Now the INTP, they're going to do pretty well because they're charming. They got that extroverted feeling in their fourth function, which they kind of, like, you'll see them turn it on when they need to, and they just got this like charming kind of, like, look how smart I am, kind of attitude, and you totally want to hire them because they're totally smart. And as long as it's not one of those jobs where like they have to be on the clock at a moment's notice, available, if it's like a computer programming job or something like that, they're great. You put them in a room, let them think through the problem, they'll figure it out. But just to expect them to work on a orderly schedule. Same with the INFPs. They'll they definitely have some strong suits, but let's just say planning for uncertainty is not one of them. Now they'll think of a lot of creative things, and I guess that could happen. I guess they could ask you that, but chances are they're not. Let's just go by the book on this one. Okay, enough bagging on the INFP, INTPs. I love you guys, but you're funny. Okay, last one, it'd be extroverted or introverted intuition as the tool function. So these are your ENTJs and your ENFJs. Totally opposite than the INTJ, INFP. They are going to be distilling what's the nature of this job, like what's the core essence of being the senior vice president of sales at Acme Corporation. What are they really looking for? They are going to know, like, they're not, where the INFJ is thinking, like, what is this person looking for? Like, what makes this person happy? How can I make this person happy that is across the table from me interviewing me? The ENTJ who's using their introverted intuition as the tool function, they're thinking more about the essence of the job. Like, what does it mean to have this job? And how is this going to play out in, especially the ENTJ, because they're long-term planners. Like, they can't help themselves. They're just always thinking of their long-term plan and how is this job going to fit into my long-term plan? And then vice versa. How does my long-term plan fit into this job? And so they are going to have very good answers to questions like, where do you see yourself in 5 years? What is it about this company that interests you? And they are going to tell you, here is my long-term plan, and your particular job, senior vice president of sales at Acme Corporation, fits into my long-term plan because this is the essence of the job, right? And whatever it is, they'll come up with a good explanation for it, right? But they're using that second function, that tool function, to build up their sort of their argument, I guess, or to plan for it, to figure out, like, how am I going to impress these people that are interviewing me. Same with the ENFJ. Let's see here. So they're going to also think about, like, what's the core essence of this job, but they're going to have sort of the extroverted feeling part of it. So they're going to sort of think of how do my skills, people skills, align with the fundamental essence of this job, right? So again, senior vice president of sales of Acme Corporation, and they're going to, they've got the extroverted feeling as their dominant function, so that's just on autopilot. They are charming. They're very socially aware, very, just sort of their social acumen is, really good. So they don't have to worry about that. But what they do have to sort of think through is, how does the job sort of match up with that, right? The sort of core essence of the job, your company relies on salespeople to drive revenues. Revenues count for this, sales revenues count for this percentage of the budget, blah, 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 blah. And you sort of distill all that into, here's the nature of this job, and my skill set fits, perfectly with that, right? Like, you need somebody with my sort of personality to accomplish the goals of this job. Okay, so they're using their introverted intuition as the tool function, as the thing that's sort of doing the processing, doing the operating to get them what they want. Okay, so we've gone through all the different functions. For anybody I was bagging on, I'm sorry, but it's just the way it is. Hopefully that gives you a good example of what the tool functions are. And I could imagine a lot of people are probably asking, like, well, isn't that the dominant function? Like, why aren't they, you're sort of talking about their dominant function and their tool function at the same time. Which one is it? Yeah, it's a little hard to parse out. They are working together, and so the lines sort of get a little fuzzy. But I think of the tool function as, how do I get what I want? And what function do I rely on to get what I want? And yeah, they're sort of working together, but it's that second function that really drives the attention. What are you focused on while you're doing your planning, or while you're in your interview? What are you focused on? Again, from an INFJ perspective, we're really just focusing on bullshitting with the person, just having a good time, just like building up rapport. A lot of jobs will be like, hey, look, you were hired before you ever walked in the door, just simply based off of your GPA, your resume, what school you went to, or whatever, whatever sort of filtering mechanism they have, your prior work experience. A lot of jobs, like they're not going to waste their time interviewing people that they don't think are qualified for the job, but they just want to make sure that you sort of pass the no asshole test, or what they call the 3 o'clock in the morning airport test. Like, if I'm stuck at an airport with this person, am I going to want to shoot myself, or can I live with this person? And so I sort of, and I, from an INFJ perspective, I just sort of go in an interview sort of thinking about that, like, just like, hey, my resume speaks for itself. I wouldn't have gotten to this point if I wasn't competent enough. But um, uh, not only that, but you'll like me. You'll like working with me, and you can tell just by talking to me for 5 minutes, we'll get along. That's just the INFJ way. It really is. And ISFJs are the same way. Like, that's just what extroverted feeling does. Of course, ESFJs and ENFJs, they have that extroverted feeling, but they're not really relying on it so much as a tool function. Like, it's just always there. Like, they're just used to everybody just liking them, and they're not really focusing any attention on it like an INFJ or an ISFJ will. Like, an INFJ and an ISFJ, like, they're trying to, like, they're thinking about it. It's in their conscious attention. Like, hey, I'm going to build rapport with this person. I'm going to um, get to know, I'm going to try to read this person and look around their office, see if they've got posters of bands, or, pictures of trips that they went on, that you can just make slight mention of it and build some sort of personal connection. Like, oh, hey, cool, you went to Paris? Yeah, yeah. We went there a few years ago. Yeah, it was really fun. And that's all you have to say, and you build a little connection. That's the ISFJ, INFJ kind of way of sort of sort of being in the world, but we're very conscious of it. Like, we know we're doing it. ESFJs, ENFJs, they might do the same thing, but they're not thinking about it. They're just on autopilot. Like, they're not doing it in so much of a conscious, deliberated way as a just like they've just always been like that, and that's just how they always act. But what they are thinking about, like with the ESFJ, that's using their introverted sensing function. That's where their spotlight, their focus of attention is on, is that introverted sensing. And they're thinking like, okay, well, this person asked me this question, and my experience was, when they asked me this question, the book told me, or my friend told me, I should answer it this way. And so it's, I don't want to say it's robotic, but it is a little automatic in a way. But that extroverted feeling part is just sort of running in the background. Where again, the INFJ and ISFJ are trying to bring everybody's attention to, hey, we all just sort of get along here. And, if you hire me, it'll be cool. Like, you're not gonna have any problem with me. And it's kind of funny, because if the ESFJ and the ENFJ sort of just, worked on that, or worked at it from that level, they probably would be perfectly fine. But they're so worried about, like, what's the essence of the job, or, what kind of experience can I rely on to prove my competency here, and don't even realize that the person already likes them. And so really all they could do is just shoot themselves in the foot. And so, yeah, so that's the tool function. Where does your attentional spotlight go when you're dealing with sort of new situations? It doesn't really focus so much on your dominant function. Yes, your dominant function and your tool function are going to work together, and they sort of have this synergistic, ephemeral quality that comes out of it, that's different for each type. But the function that's sort of driving the process is going to be that secondary function, whether it's extroverted or introverted. So I hope that helps. Interested in hearing everybody's thoughts. Again, sorry for the long rambling, but this is really the only way I can force myself to do it. Um, I got the SP in the fourth slot. So unless somebody's, cracking a whip on me and telling me to put together like a nice, succinct 15-minute slideshow, it's just not going to happen. I'm just going to roll with it. So thanks for hanging in there. If you got anything to say, feel free to put it in the comment. Otherwise, I'll see you next time. Okay, have a good one.